Things just got a whole lot tougher. We were in big trouble, and saving our friends was gonna be super hard. But then, something crazy happened. On the other side of the monster, one of our teammates yelled out, "No way, the Liberation Army never gives up. Fight guys, fight!" I knew that voice, it was Korvat's. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted back. We were missing 2 people in a super dangerous zone, which meant they were probably gone for good. And Korvat's wanted us to keep fighting. I was so angry I could feel my blood boiling. Just then, Klein's team caught up to us. "What's all the commotion about?" someone asked. I quickly filled them in on what was happening. Klein scrunched up his face in frustration. "Can't we do something to help them?" I thought that if we jumped into the battle we might be able to clear a path for the soldiers to get out safely. But there was a big problem: we didn't have a way to teleport to safety. And that meant we could get hurt too. We just didn't have enough people to make it work. As I stood there trying to decide what to do, Korvat's was already taking charge. He got his men on their feet, and started yelling orders across the room. "Charge!" he bellowed. Out of the 10 soldiers who were still alive, 2 were badly hurt and lying on the floor. The other 8 formed 2 lines of 4, with Korvat's leading the way with his sword. I tried to stop them, screaming no. Stop, but my voice was drowned out by the chaos. It was crazy. They were running straight into danger without a plan. Imagine 8 brave warriors charging at a monster all at once. It's like trying to tackle a giant with a bunch of tiny punches. They wouldn't be able to use their unique skills. And it would just be super confusing. Instead they should work together, taking turns doing small bits of damage and swapping out quickly. Just then the beast stood up on its hind legs, put its hands on its hips, and let out a deafening roar. Steam shot out of its mouth like a powerful engine. And it was so hot that it hurt the soldiers who got too close. They started to slow down and get weaker. The demon swung its massive sword again. And one of the warriors, Korvat's, got hit really badly. He flew over the demon's head and landed with a thud on the ground right in front of us. Unfortunately he didn't get up. His health was gone and his HP bar was empty. It was a tough moment for our team. Korvat's face said it all. He couldn't believe what was happening. His mouth opened slowly, and he whispered one word: impossible. But before he could even finish saying it, his body exploded into a million tiny pieces, with a loud annoying crackle. It was so sudden, that Asuna let out a short scream. The army squad was in total chaos, now that their leader was gone. They ran around screaming and panicking, without any idea what to do next. None of them were even close to being okay. They were all badly hurt. Asuna looked like she was in shock, struggling to get the words out. "No, no, you can't." I tried to grab her arm to calm her down, but I was too slow. Before I could reach her, she took off like a shot, shouting at the top of her lungs, "You can't do this." She was like a whirlwind, moving fast and furious. Here's the rewritten text. Asuna suddenly pulled out her sword and dove into a beam of light called the Gleam. "Yes. Asuna!" I yelled, having to follow her lead. Klein and his friends were right behind us, watching our backs. Asuna's bold attack hit the demon straight on, but it barely made a dent in its health. The Gleam Yaz was furious. It spun around, swinging its massive sword with incredible speed. Asuna dodged out of the way just in time, but the shockwave from the blade sent her tumbling to the ground. The monster wasn't done yet. It swung its sword again for a second attack. Asuna saw. I was terrified. And my heart was racing. I lunged forward, trying to get between Asuna and the deadly sword. I barely dodged the demon's attack at the last second. Our weapons clashed, sending sparks flying everywhere. The giant sword slammed into the floor just inches from Asuna, making a huge gash and a deafening boom. "Get back!" I yelled, bracing myself for the demon's next hit. The demon swung its sword fast and hard, each blow powerful enough to be deadly. I didn't have time to fight back. I had to focus on dodging its attacks. The Gleam Yes was using some seriously cool and scary moves with its giant sword, but it was impossible for me to predict what would come next. Its combos were too perfect, and I was totally caught off guard. My heart was racing as I tried to dodge and block every attack, but it was like trying to hold back a flood. There were just too many blows coming at me. I managed to deflect some of them but not all, and my health started to slip away bit by bit. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Klein's team rushing to help the fallen soldiers. They were trying to drag them to safety. But it was tough, because the demon and I were battling it out right in the middle of the room. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the demon landed a powerful hit. Erg. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My body went numb from the shock, and my health plummeted. The problem was, my gear and skills weren't meant for withstanding tons of damage. I wasn't built to be a tank. And it was starting to show. I was running out of time. Fast. Fear was creeping in, making my arms and legs feel icy cold. I couldn't even move properly to get away. There was only one thing left to do: fight back with everything I had. Asuna, Klein. Just hang in there for 10 more seconds. I yelled. I swung my sword with all my might and blocked the monster's next attack. For a split second it paused. And that's all the time I needed. I rolled out of the way just in time, and Klein jumped in with his katana to fill the gap. But there was a problem. Both Klein's katana and Asuna's rapier were super fast, but they weren't heavy enough to do some serious damage. We were in trouble. I was in big trouble. The demon's massive horse cleaver was about to come crashing down. I quickly swiped my left hand across the floor, bringing up my menu. I had to act fast. One mistake could be disastrous. My heart was racing as I frantically scrolled through my inventory list. I found what I needed and made it appear in an instant. Next, I equipped it on my virtual mannequin, and switched to a new skill. My fingers were flying across the buttons. Once everything was set, I hit OK and felt a new weight on my back. I looked up, ready for action. All ready, I shouted. But Klein was already pulling back, his health bar lower than before. He must have taken a hit from that powerful demon. Here's the rewritten text. Usually I'd use a special crystal to heal myself, but that wouldn't work here. Asuna was distracting the demon now and she was running out of time. In just a few seconds, her health would be down to half, and she'd be in trouble. I gave her a signal from behind, and she nodded. With a loud ya-la, cha-la, she launched a powerful attack, her sword flashing forward, and leaving a trail of white sparks behind. The demon's sword clashed with hers, sending sparks flying everywhere. The impact was so strong that it knocked both Asuna and the demon backward, creating an opening between them. That was my cue switch, I shouted, jumping into action to face the enemy without hesitation. The demon was back in action, swinging its massive Zanbeto sword in a wide arc. Flames trailed behind it as it clashed with my trusty sword in my right hand. At the same time, I grabbed the new sword on my back with my left hand and swung it at the demon's body. It was our first solid hit, and for a moment I saw the demon's health bar actually go down. The demon let out a furious roar, Groa, yeah, and tried to swing its sword down again. But this time I was ready. I held both swords in front of me, crossed like an X, and absorbed the blow. The force of the demon's attack pushed back against it, making it lose its balance. That was my chance. I jumped into action, swinging my right sword in a strong mid-level slash. It was time to take control of this fight. I struck fast with my left blade, then my right, and left again. My swords were a blur, moving so quickly that it felt like they were on fire. The sound of clashing metal filled the air. Zip, 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 and flashes of light shot out everywhere. I was using my secret move, dual blades. This was Starburst Stream, a powerful combo with 16 different attacks. Rostoza. I yelled, not stopping even when the demon blocked a few hits. I kept swinging, left and right, my blades flying through the air. Everything started to get fuzzy. My eyes felt like they were burning, and I could barely see the demon anymore. Even when its sword hit me, it felt like it was happening to someone else. I was totally focused on my attack. I was totally pumped. My heart was racing like crazy as I swung my swords back and forth. Faster and faster I went, trying to keep up with the speed of the game. It was like my mind was moving at lightning speed. I felt like I was swinging those swords a million times a minute. But it still wasn't fast enough. Suddenly I let out a loud blah. Has, as I landed the final blow on the Gleam Yes demon. My sword hit it right in the chest, and the demon let out an ear-piercing groa. It looked up at the ceiling, its mouth and nose pouring out white smoke. For a split second everything seemed to freeze. Then kaboom! The Gleam Yes exploded into a million tiny pieces of light. The room was filled with glittering sparks that rained down everywhere. I stumbled back, my eyes blurry from the intense battle. Without even thinking, I sheathed my swords and strapped them to my back. As I caught my breath, I wondered, is it really over? I glanced down at my health bar and my heart sank. Only a tiny bit of red was left. I felt like I was staring at someone else's life force, not mine. Suddenly all my energy vanished, and I slid to the floor without making a sound. Everything went black. Then I heard Asuna's frantic voice shouting my name. Kirito! Her scream pulled me back from the darkness. I slowly sat up, wincing in pain as my head throbbed. Ba. I groaned. As I looked around, I realized I was still in the boss's lair. The air was still filled with twinkling blue lights, so I must have only been out for a few seconds. Asuna's face appeared right above mine, her eyes welling up with tears. She was biting her lip and her eyebrows were scrunched together in worry. "You idiot!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around my neck and squeezing tight. "That was so crazy reckless." Whoa, I was totally shocked. For a second I even forgot about the pounding headache. I tried to joke with Asuna. "Hey, not too tight. Okay. I don't want to lose all my health." But she just looked really upset. Then she gave me a small bottle, and I had to drink from it. The stuff inside tasted like green tea mixed with lemon juice, pretty weird. It was a special potion that would help me feel better in just 5 minutes. But I knew I'd still feel weak for a while longer. Asuna made sure I drank the whole thing, then she leaned her head on my shoulder. I couldn't see her face, but I could tell she was crying. Just then we heard footsteps coming our way. Klein spoke up, sounding really unsure of himself. "We helped all the other survivors, but Korvats and 2 others didn't make it." Asuna sounded really sad when she replied, "This is the first time we've lost anyone to a boss, since we were on the 67th floor. Then someone asked, "Can you really call this a win? It doesn't feel like it." Klein's face turned red with anger. "What's the point of standing up to the boss, if it's just gonna get you killed?" he exclaimed. He shook his head and let out a deep sigh. Then his expression changed, and he looked at me with curiosity. "But seriously, what just happened? You did something crazy." I hesitated, not sure if I wanted to explain. "Do I really have to tell you?" I asked. Klein's eyes widened with excitement. "You bet you do. I've never seen anything like that before." I glanced around the room and realized everyone was staring at me, waiting for an answer. Asuna was the only one who didn't seem surprised. I took a deep breath and said, "It's called Dual Blades. It's an extra skill." The room erupted into whispers and murmurs. Klein's friends and the other players from the army looked at each other in amazement. In the game of Sailway, weapon skills were usually divided into different categories. As you progressed, new skills would become available. But something like Dual Blades was totally unexpected. Let's talk about swords. Imagine you're getting really good with a basic one-handed sword. As you get better, you'll unlock new types of swords to try out, like rapiers or two-handed swords. They'll show up in your skill list and you can start using them. My friend Klein was super curious about how to unlock these new skills. "How do you get them?" he asked. I had to admit, I have no idea. If I knew, I'd tell everyone. He nodded like he understood. "There are some special skills called extra skills that are a bit mysterious. We're not really sure how to get them, and it might even be random. Klein has a cool katana skill, that's one of these extra skills. He got it by upgrading his curved sword skill, over and over again. It's not that hard to get, but some of the other extra skills are really tough. Only about 10 people have unlocked each of the dozen or so extra skills in the game." Here's the rewritten text. "I had a secret skill that no one else in the game Aincrad had, my extra skill Dual Blades. There was only one other person with a unique skill like mine. We were like the only 2 people in the whole game with these super special abilities. I had kept my Dual Blades a secret until now, but it was hard to hide anymore. Too many people just saw me use them, and by tomorrow, everyone would be talking about it." My friend was pretty surprised when he found out. "Kirito, how could you keep this amazing skill from me?" he asked. I just shrugged. Honestly, if I knew how I got it, I wouldn't have kept it a secret. I shook my head, honestly clueless. It all started about a year ago when Dual Blades suddenly showed up in my skill window. I have no idea how it got there. Since then, I've been secretly practicing the skill, making sure no one was watching. Even after I got really good at it, I only used it when I was in big trouble while adventuring. I wanted to keep it a secret, like a special safety net. Plus, I didn't want people to freak out and bother me about it. I scratched the back of my ear, feeling a bit nervous. If people find out I have this super rare skill, they'll probably bug me nonstop. I mumbled, "I just don't want all that attention and drama." Klein nodded, seeming to understand where I was coming from. Here's the rewritten text. Let's face it, online gamers can get pretty jealous. But I'm not gonna give you a hard time, because I'm a cool guy. There will always be people who like to hate on others though. The speaker looked over at Asuna, who was still holding tight to my arm, and flashed a big grin. Think of all the tough stuff you're going through as just part of your training, he said with a chuckle. Good luck, kid. I rolled my eyes. Easy for you to say. Just then Klein leaned over and gave my shoulder a friendly pat. He turned and walked over to the surviving players from the army team. Hey, can you guys make it back to your headquarters okay? He asked. One of them, a teenager, nodded. Yeah, we can make it. Klein looked him straight in the eye. Good. When you get back, tell them exactly what happened here today. Make sure they understand how reckless it was, and promise never to do it again. The teen nodded, looking serious. I will, sir. Thanks, I muttered. But before I could even get the word out, Klein pointed at me and said, no, thank him. The two army guys stumbled to their feet and bowed super low to Asuna and me, then they quickly left the room. As soon as they were in the hallway, they pulled out these cool crystals that let them teleport away from the labyrinth. After they disappeared, Klein turned back to us with a big smile on his face. Now it's time to activate the special gate on the 75th floor, he said, putting his hands on his hips. What's your next move? You're the hero of the day. Want to do the honors? I shook my head, feeling exhausted. Nah, you can handle it. I'm beat. Klein just nodded and said, all right, take it easy then. He signaled to his friends, and they all took off. We finally reached the big door at the back of the room. Our leader, a tall and lanky guy, stopped and turned around to face us. Hey Kirito, I have to say, when you jumped in to help the army like that, he started to say, but then just smiled and said, it made my day. See you next time. I had no idea what he meant by that. Klein gave me a thumbs up over his shoulder, then opened the door and walked through it. Suddenly Asuna and I were alone in the huge room. The fires on the floor had gone out, and the creepy feeling that used to be there was totally gone. It was weird how quiet and normal the room felt now. The room was now filled with the same soft glow as the hallway. It was hard to believe that just a little while ago, it had been a scene of total chaos. I looked down at Asuna, whose head was still resting on my shoulder. Hey, Asuna, I said softly. She whispered back, her voice shaking like a leaf. I was so scared. I didn't know what I would do if you died. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I had never heard her sound so nervous and afraid before. I tried to reassure her with a smile. Don't be silly, I said. You're the one who jumped into battle first. Remember, I gently put my hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her. For a moment I didn't care if the game's rules got in the way. This was more important. I gently pulled her close and she whispered something in my ear that made my heart skip a beat. I'm taking a break from the guild, she said, her voice barely audible. I was taken aback. A break? What are you gonna do? I stuttered. She smiled mischievously and replied. Remember I told you we'd be teaming up together. As soon as I heard those words, I felt a strong feeling surge through my chest. It was like a deep longing. It caught me off guard because I'm Kirito, the guy who plays alone. I've always pushed people away to stay safe in this crazy virtual world. In fact, I even turned my back on my only friend on the very first day we started playing. But now something about her words made me feel like that was all going to change. I was scared to let people get close to me. I had gotten hurt before and it wasn't fun. I promised myself that I wouldn't make the same mistake again. But then I met Asuna. She was different. When I put my hand on her shoulder, I didn't want to let go. It felt warm and safe, even though we were just in a virtual world. I was confused. Part of me wanted to pull away and be alone, but another part of me wanted to stay with Asuna. I didn't know what to do. But then I looked at her and said, okay, fine. It wasn't a big answer, but it was all I could manage. Asuna smiled and nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. The next day I was feeling pretty down. I spent the morning hanging out on the second floor of Agile's store, just thinking about everything that had happened. I didn't really know what to do with myself, so I just moped around. I plopped down in a creaky rocking chair, crossing my legs and frowning at the weird-smelling tea in my hand. It was probably left over because nobody else wanted it. The whole town of Algade and probably all of the Aincrad too was abuzz with excitement about what happened yesterday. Usually when a new floor is finished and a town opens up, people get pretty stoked. But this time there was even more to talk about. I mean, where do I even start? There were rumors about an army group getting destroyed by a monster, and some crazy guy who took it down all by himself with not one but two swords. He supposedly landed 50 hits in a row. Yeah, right? I know stories can get out of hand, but this was just silly. Things got even crazier earlier that morning. I had a bunch of sword-wielding players and infiltrators showing up at my doorstep, trying to talk to me. How did they even find me? It was so wild that I had to use a teleport crystal just to escape them. As I sat there sipping my gross tea, I thought to myself, I've got to move out of here, pronto. I'm outta here, I said, looking for a quiet spot where no one could find me. But Agile just grinned at me like a crazy person. Come on, superstar. Everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame. Why not give them a live show? I'll sell the tickets, and I cut him off with a laugh. Yeah, right? I jokingly tossed my teacup in his direction, but not really aiming for him. The weird thing is, my throwing blade skill kicked in automatically. The cup flew across the room like a bullet, smashing into the wall with a super loud crash. Luckily, the building is basically indestructible. All that happened was a warning message popped up saying I am mortal object. But if I had hit any of the furniture, it would have been toast. The shopkeeper freaked out, screaming, "Who are you trying to kill me?" I held up my hand and said sorry. Then sat back down with an embarrassed grin. Agile was checking out the awesome treasure I had found during yesterday's battle. Every now and then he'd let out a surprised whoa, which meant I must have gotten some really rare stuff. After I sold it all, I planned to split the cash with my friend Asuna. But when we were supposed to meet up, she was nowhere to be found. So, I sent her a message in the game so she'd know where to come find me. We had parted ways at the teleport gate on the 74th floor the day before. Asuna had said she was going to tell the Knights of the Blood, or COBE for short, that she was taking some time off, and then she headed to their headquarters in a place called Granzam on the 55th floor. I had to tell Kirito about what happened with Kuradel, so I asked if I could go with her to fill him in. But she just smiled and said she'd be okay on her own. We were already 2 hours late for our meeting. Which wasn't like her. Something must have gone wrong. Should I have pushed to go with her anyway? I gulped down the rest of my tea, trying not to get too worried. As I waited, Agile finished checking out my stuff. Just as the teapot was empty, I heard fast footsteps coming up the stairs. The door burst open and yo, Asuna. But my joke died on my lips. Asuna stood before Kirito, her usual confidence shaken. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with worry. She squeezed her hands together in front of her chest and bit her lip a few times before speaking up.
"What are we going to do, Kirito?"
she asked, her voice trembling on the edge of tears. Something's wrong. After they made some fresh tea, Asuna started to feel a little better. Some color returned to her cheeks, and she began to explain what was bothering her. Meanwhile, Agile was nice enough to keep an eye on the store downstairs. So here's what happened, Asuna said. I went to the guild headquarters in Granzam yesterday, to talk to the commander. I told him I needed some time off from the guild, and then I headed home for the night.
"I thought that would be it."
I'd take a break and come back when I was ready. Asuna looked down at her cup of tea, her eyes clouding over. But this morning the commander said he wouldn't let me take time off unless I agreed to something else. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. He gave me an ultimatum: meet his condition, or forget about my temporary leave.